Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, starting a new build. We have the Builder's version. Now, there is also a pre-assembled version of the Blue Origin New Shepard rocket, which is Jeff Bezos's rocket of it's really questionably shaped. But in any event, yeah, we're going to give this one a go. It is a scale-ish model, and it should be pretty good fun. There's not a whole lot really to it because, well, it's a fairly straightforward little design, and a lot of the cool stuff has already been built for us. So here's the nose cone and the where the crew would be. This is all made for us. We're actually going to deal with this first. It's farther along in the instructions, but since we have it, we have a couple things to do. You can see there's a little bit of plastic in here and that needs to be cut out. So we're going to stick the, actually, ooh, look at that, popped right out. I didn't have to do anything. But in any event, should you need to actually cut it out, cut toward the center rather than out toward the ring. Now, this is a pretty thick bit of plastic right in here, so you're probably not just going to randomly cut through it, but still get in the habit of cutting toward like the center mass. So that popped out really, really easily. So that's convenient. Now, this thing requires some extra weight in the nose cone. And that can happen for a variety of reasons, but stability is an issue, especially when we're dealing with models of actual real rockets. So if you've made the bullpup model, we did have to put some weight in the nose cone for that too. And it's generally because real rockets actually have control systems in them, so you don't need to worry too much about stability. I mean, it's nice to have fins in there, so you don't need to have your rockets constantly jittering back and forth this way to keep them going in the right direction, but we don't have that luxury. So in any event, putting weight forward, as far forward as possible, in this case, the nose cone, generally adds stability and offsets if the fins aren't the whole way back or if the fins are not particularly big. So we have a piece of clay. This obviously isn't going to fit right in there, so we're going to do a little bit of preschool work here, and we're going to take our clay and we're going to roll it out into a snake. We don't need it super thin. All we need to do is roll it out so it'll fit through the hole, and this is a pretty big hole. So we can put a pretty thick clay snake in there. Now that it's in, I mean, it's hard to see what's going on in there. This one's actually not too bad to see through, but it's still kind of tough. So I have a good old-fashioned dowel here that I've used more than one time for glue painting. This one's actually got some epoxy residue on it. So I'm going to just put it in here, and I'm going to try to scrape like the side of the cone here to push the clay as close to the middle as I can get it. And I generally can't see what I'm doing, and now at this point I'm just going to kind of pat it in so that it stays up there. This stuff, for whatever reason, this clay is pretty nice. When it dries out, it usually sticks to wherever it was. It's not like, as far as I know, there's no glue or anything in it, but it just happens to dry that way. So I'm going to push it in as far as I can, just trying to keep it centered in the middle, just tamping it down here. I suspect I can feel it as I'm pushing in. It's not particularly even, like there are big ridges in there, but we don't really care all that much so long as it's in the nose cone. And I can't really see it because this plastic is pretty thick, but sometimes you can like look through and you can see the discoloration of the clay in the nose cone. Actually, I can a little bit. Or you can try to look down there. This, it's hard to see. I'm now going to look in it, and it seems to be fairly good. So this is great. This can go off and live by itself for quite a while. The next thing that we probably should do is sand all this stuff, and I've taken the time to sand it off camera because who really wants to watch that? I'm not going to cut it out just yet. Actually, there's one piece I'm going to cut out now because I'm going to try to do as many little pieces in this video as I can. So this part right here, I'm going to cut along the edges. And remember, if it doesn't just pop out the first time, don't force it. Just trace along the edges a couple times. And if you're still having trouble, try flipping it over and cutting along the other side. The last thing we want to do is force it out and snap it or end up with like a giant burr sticking off the side. So in any event, burrs are kind of minimal here. what would be a good idea is to just grab a little bit of sandpaper, and I'm just going to rub it back and forth a little bit. This is not a piece of the fin. This is for attaching the launch lug, because since the nose cone protrudes, sticks out in its, let's call it mushroom shape, past the body tube, which is right here. If we just put the launch lug, which is right here, right along the side, that wouldn't work. The launch rod would get stuck on the nose cone. So this is just an offset. So when we put it together, we're going to glue it. Obviously, it'll be lined up like this, so the launch rod will be able to get past the nose cone. So this doesn't need to be like beautiful in any way, shape, or form. It's obviously not scale. It's not included in the real model. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time finishing this. All I wanted to do was cut it out so the balsa sheet can go away, the extra sandpaper can go away, and I'm going to just glue these together right now. Oops, probably ought to cover this knife. There we go. So this is very far later in the instructions, but since I am looking for things to do that are fairly quick in this first video, I'm going to attach it now. A little bit of glue. This is not really one where we have to do all of the usual work about 2 layers of glue, let it start to get tacky, because there's not a lot of force likely to ever really be encountered by this thing. So just spread out the glue, and these line up. They're basically the same size. I prefer to do it kind of vertically. Not that that's perfectly vertical either. You do want to get the launch lug centered, right? So you don't want it one edge or the other. So that looks pretty good. And just look at it. I'm tilting it back so I can look at it right now. It appears to be pretty straight. And you also want it centered too. Looks like I'm off by a little bit, so I'm going to push it down a wee tiny bit. And that looks great. So that can go off somewhere to dry. So I won't be needing that for a while. Now, what I wanted to spend most of the time in this video doing is building the engine mount. And the engine mount is a little unusual this time because it has, the thing is ultimately going to look like this. And the engine mount goes inside. So we have this section that's going to be somewhat attached to the motor mount, because we want the motor mount to stick out through the back. So this is going to be involved. We actually have, this is nice too. This is a motor mount, or an engine retainer. So instead of having a hook, like we've done sometimes, one of these things, this is screw on, and this is, don't glue it closed, obviously, but these are pretty nice to have. I like them better than the hooks. But we're going to need that. This part, the part that actually screws on, we're going to put elsewhere. There's our motor section. There's our engine block. That was actually, I had to look really hard to find that because it was stuck inside of the engine mount, which was irritating. Here is the card stock that's going to be going with this. For the most part, you can generally punch these out. You can use the hobby knife if you want, but it still leaves burrs. Punching them out this way, if you're careful about it, it's generally not too bad in terms of burrs. And if you get a particularly bad one like that, you can always grab the sandpaper and just kind of roll it like that, and the burr usually comes off pretty nicely. But again, this is an interior bit, so the quality of the finish isn't going to be affected. One thing we do care about is the fit, right? Because it's got to fit around this and inside the body tube itself. So if we have giant burrs, that would make it harder for both to fit. So we'll be careful about that. We're only going to really worry about nasty burrs, though. All right, so that's punched out. Now we need to follow the instructions, and the instructions call for us to do a little bit of measuring. This one's kind of unusual. We only need to do one measurement. So grab my ruler, these things for the moment, and we need to measure on our motor mount, or sorry, our engine here, engine mount. We need 1 inch from the end. This is actually kind of hung up on something. Let's move it. There we go. So 1 inch is approximately right here. Does this need to be perfect? Nah, not really. What does need to be perfect, though, is this part sticking out the back, Because if that doesn't line up right, if we get too much or too little, then we won't have any room for the retainer and the whole thing will be a mess. So we do need to be careful about that. But we're going to kind of test fit things in order to make sure that we don't have any issues with that. Next step is to put the motor and the engine block in. That's going in the side that away from where we measured, so it's going in here. We do not actually need to measure how far in this is. It just is going right to the edge, so that's unusual. So I'll just paint a little bit of glue on the inside here. And I'll probably get my dowel or my little piece of balsa scrap to spread that out, just to make sure. And again, just be careful when you put the engine block in that you don't push it past the edge. So a nice way to do it, turn it upside down, get it in a little bit, turn it upside down, and just push it down. Can't go any farther if you're just pushing it down. So that looks pretty good. And I've done it on the correct side, so thumbs up. The next thing we need to do is we're going to take the edge that does not have the little mark in it. Now, ironically, we don't really care this time because we don't have an engine hook. This little section that's missing is generally for the engine hook. So I suppose these are interchangeable for this model. But in any event, we need to attach this one right at the edge. So I'm actually going to start it at the other end, and I'm going to work it down. This is actually proving to be somewhat difficult. I might have to sand off a burr or two, but I don't think that's really the case. So there we go. I'm going to kind of deform the end of the tube a little bit. I've got to fix that. So I'm going to work this down. I generally find it easier to put the glue on and then push it down rather than the other way. Plus, we just put the block in here, so this is extra rigid right here. So we didn't have the luxury of being able to deform the tube briefly. Again, this is going right at the end, so I'm just going to paint on a bit of glue. I will spread it out once it's on, and it's going to go right at the end. So there we go. Again, you can just push this down. It's going to make a bit of a gluey mess on whatever surface you're working on, so hopefully you get some paper down, or just wipe it up. There we go. And I'm going to use a little bit of paper towel here, tissue or something, to clean up the edge of this as well. It is good or important that it lies perpendicular and flat, so you can just kind of push things down to make sure that everything is where it ought to be, at least for this section. So that's taken care of. Last but not least, we need to put this section on, and it's going to go to the inch mark that I had drawn. So I'm going to, again, work it on. This one's actually easier because it's got the notch in it, so it has a little more give. And I'm going to push it past my line again, and then I'm going to work it back momentarily. I need a glue line. If you're really concerned about precision, you can measure this in more than one place, but I'm not, because it's going to kind of work itself out once I push that ring down. And we have kind of like an extra little measurement that we're going to be doing shortly to make sure everything works out right. So spreading things out there a little bit. I actually can't see my line anymore, so I hope when I spread the glue out it becomes apparent again, but it has not. Well, I guess I'll have to find it, but I can have my ruler handy just in case after the fact. I should probably do that anyway. So I'm going to kind of spin this down a little bit to where I think the line is approximately. It should be a little bit farther. That looks about right. Now you do want to make sure that it is perpendicular to the tube or to the ground, so stand it up and kind of spin it around and have a look. I'm going to measure this. It looks like it's a little bit more than an inch at this point, so I should probably adjust it down a wee bit more. There we go. Since I've adjusted it, I need to make sure that I didn't mess up the angle again, so we'll have a look. Yeah, that's almost exactly an inch right now. Now, here's the part where the instructions want to make sure that we don't screw this up and mess up the retainer. We're going to put this through, and this is a good way to make sure that the ring is perpendicular as well, because the big plastic piece doesn't bend, so it's going to tell you. Then we need to put this piece on top. And notice we're not gluing anything. We're just kind of test fitting it. And it should, the engine, the tube here, the engine mounting should basically fit to the edge of this. And we could try pushing this down if we really wanted to. It would, well, there you go. It shifted everything. Since we've done that, we'll just push it back up. I'm pushing down on the top and up on the bottom. So this is exactly where it needs to be. Now, this isn't glued, and I don't want it to be glued like for a long time. So off this stuff comes, and the motor assembly is basically done at this point. Now, what I do want to do, however, before we do anything else, and this will kind of wrap up this video, is I do want to put glue fillets to make sure that this whole thing is as strong as possible. It should be fine to have a glue fillet on this side because nothing's touching, the plastic isn't going to be touching anything. So I'm going to apply some glue like so, a decent amount. I'm going to spread that out with my finger. I'm going to apply it to the bottom as well. And then I'm going to need to flip it and apply it to the underside of this. And this is just a precaution. Usually the glue, I don't think I've ever had an engine assembly like fail, the glue fail and get pushed up to where it shouldn't be, but better safe than sorry. Anyway, I'm just going to put my finger here, not really push, but just rotate this around, and that should spread the glue out and make a nice fillet. It's kind of weird with the hole there, but that's okay. Same deal here. Spin it around. Just kind of laying my finger. I'm not even moving it. And then last but not least, we've got this one as well. This needs to dry very thoroughly before we try to mess with it. We certainly don't want to try to jam it into the body tube if it is not perfectly set up, because we could mess things up pretty badly. We don't want to do that. So at this point, it seems like a good place to stop. The next video, we'll start doing the fin assembly, and we won't really worry about putting the motor mount into the body tube until after we have all the fins on and we're more or less ready to glue. This, by the way, I'm not going to attach this at all until after I've painted it, so that can go live far, far away, so I don't mess with it anytime soon. All right, thanks for watching. We'll do fins in part 2. See you then.